I never thought I'd end up fighting for the right to live in my own house, but that's exactly what happened. A stack of violation letters piled so high it nearly cost me my home neighbors whispering behind my back and a smug HOA president telling me to my face that maybe I didn't belong here. If I hadn't fought back, Maplewood Estates would have swallowed me whole. My name is Michael Carter, 35, IT guy. Husband, no kids, just a regular homeowner who thought he was buying peace and quiet in a suburban neighborhood. Maplewood looked perfect tree-lined streets, kids riding bikes, retired couples gardening, the kind of place where you imagine people bake cookies for each other at Christmas. But there was a catch, one I didn't fully understand until it was too late: the HOA run by Linda Walker. Linda, who wore pearl earrings to every meeting and carried herself like the Queen of Maplewood. At first, I didn't think much of her. I figured, okay, she's probably the type who likes rules neat and tidy. That's fine. But it didn't take long before I realized Linda wasn't just maintaining order, she was building her own little empire. It all started with my garage door. I painted it navy blue. It looked sharp, modern, and honestly, it fit my house perfectly. 2 days later, I got a letter taped to my door. Color not approved. Must be corrected immediately. Daily fines of $200 will apply. $200 a day for paint. I thought it had to be a mistake, so I checked the HOA guidelines they'd given me when I bought the house. Nothing. No mention of garage colors. So I walked down to the little HOA office, which looked more like a converted storage room, and tried to talk it out. Linda was sitting there behind a cheap oak desk, smiling like a shark. When I asked why I was being fined for something that wasn't even in the rules, she leaned back and said, "Michael, if you don't like the way we do things here, maybe you should reconsider living in Maplewood." Just like that. No discussion, no compromise. She was telling me in her own polite, venomous way to pack up and get out. I left that office furious, but I also knew something had shifted. From that moment on, I wasn't just a homeowner anymore, I was a target. The letters kept coming. First, the grass in my front yard. Over 3 inches violation. Then the trash can. Placed 6 inches outside the approved boundary. 6 inches. The cherry on top. A violation for hanging the American flag on my porch. Apparently, I hadn't filed the proper request form. Meanwhile, I watched my neighbors leave their bins out overnight, grass sprouting like weeds, flags flying high, and not one of them got so much as a warning. This wasn't about rules. This was personal. And the more it piled up, the more isolated I felt. Neighbors who used to wave started avoiding eye contact. One guy even muttered under his breath, "Careful, Linda can take your house if you're not careful." At first, I thought he was exaggerating, but then I opened the next letter. If I didn't pay the fines, the HOA could place a lien on my property. My house, my one safe place, was suddenly at risk. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the stack of papers. My hands were shaking. I thought about the mortgage, the savings. I'd worked years for the dream of building a life here, and I thought maybe Linda's right. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe it'd be easier to sell, walk away, start over. The idea of fighting her felt impossible, like trying to push back against a machine designed to crush me. I'll admit it, for a moment I wanted to give up. But that's when Sarah knocked on my door. Sarah Miller, the neighbor across the street. Middle-aged, sharp eyes, the kind of woman who doesn't waste time on small talk. She slid a folder across my table without even asking to sit down. Inside were copies of expense reports, meeting notes, all kinds of documents she'd quietly collected. "You're not crazy," she said. "Linda's been making up rules and pushing them through without a vote. You're not the first person she's gone after, but you can be the last if you're willing to stand up." It was like flipping a switch. All that hopelessness turned into something else, anger, but this time focused. Sarah had proof. She showed me how Linda funneled HOA funds into unnecessary beautification projects that just happened to benefit her friends. She showed me rule changes typed up by Linda alone, never approved by the required 2/3 majority. Suddenly, I wasn't just the guy with the blue garage door, I was holding a weapon evidence. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I started meeting quietly with other neighbors who'd been fed up but too scared to speak. We documented everything photos of homes with the same violations that never got fined copies of Linda's letters, even a recording from a meeting where she bulldozed over anyone who tried to question her. We talked to a lawyer who confirmed what we suspected Linda was way out of line and legally she could be removed. The showdown came at the August HOA meeting. The room was packed, people crammed into folding chairs, the air thick with tension. Linda stood at the front like a general addressing her troops, announcing that dues were going up 20% to cover rising maintenance costs. Her tone was smug, like she was daring anyone to challenge her. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I stood up. "With all due respect, Linda," I said, holding up the documents, "you don't have the authority to do this without a 2/3 vote. And according to the HOA bylaws, you've been making unauthorized changes for years." Her face flushed crimson. "Sit down, Michael," she snapped. "You're out of order." But I didn't sit. I laid out the evidence line by line, picture by picture. Sarah stood with me, and then another neighbor, then another. Voices rose from the back of the room. "He's right. Enough is enough." Someone slammed a fist on the table. The room exploded with shouting, half the residents demanding accountability, the other half stunned by the audacity of it all. Linda tried to shout over us, her voice shaking, but the tide had turned. Finally, one of the board members called for order and forced a vote of no confidence. Hands shot up across the room. One after another, people who'd stayed silent for years finally chose to speak. The count wasn't even close. Linda Walker, the self-proclaimed queen of Maplewood Estates, was stripped of her title right there in the community center. I'll never forget the look on her face as she gathered her papers, trying to hold her head high while the board confirmed her removal. Red-faced, furious, humiliated. She stormed out without another word, and for the first time since moving in the room, felt lighter, like the neighborhood could finally breathe again. And me, I didn't feel triumphant, not really. Just relieved. Relieved that my house, my home, wasn't being held hostage anymore. Relieved that I'd found the strength to stand up when I was one letter away from giving in. If there's one thing I learned, it's this: bullies thrive on silence, but the moment you shine a light on them, their power crumbles.